Hi, my name's Steve Podrechik. I'm the CEO of Seattle Avionics, and today I'm going to tell you about what's new in FlyQ EFB version 2.5. This is a major update to the product. We've done a lot of work here in terms of adding features and also increasing performance, improving stability, and so on. The thing that you'll probably notice the first, though, is the ability to annotate, or scribble if you prefer, on the approach plates and on the airport diagrams, both the FAA and the Seattle Avionics airport diagrams. Similarly, because the technology is really about the same thing, we've dramatically enhanced the ability of the Scratchpad feature, which had been in the product for quite some time. We've also dramatically increased the speed of our weather updates. So now, when the National Weather Service comes out with a new METAR or a new TAF, it gets into FlyQ EFB in much less time than it did previously. A lot of folks have asked for that, and we delivered. Another thing that's a very common request, especially obviously from people who have an Avidyne, is to add in even more Avidyne support. We previously had support for transferring GPS data, AHRS data, and flight plans from FlyQ EFB to the Avidyne and vice versa. But in FlyQ EFB version 2.5, we also added the ability to have ADS-B support, both weather and traffic, in FlyQ EFB. We added plates and diagrams from Puerto Rico, from the Virgin Islands, from Guam, and from some other areas outside the United States proper. And for those of us who are getting up there a little bit and wearing reading glasses, we increased the text font size quite a bit on the road layer. In fact, I think it's doubled. So you can see the street names and so on much more easily than you could with previous versions of the product. And of course, as with all software releases, there are a number of fixes and general improvements. The thing, though, that I think that will interest most people is the plate annotation and the Scratchpad. So without further ado, let me demo that for you. Here, we're on a simulated flight. We're coming from Seattle Avionics home airport, which is in Everett, Washington. It's called Painfield. If I want to modify one of the diagrams associated with this plate, there's a lot of different ways that I can get to that. I can type it at the top, so I could just type in PAE if I wanted to. I could double tap on the map, or I could look at my flight plan. Let's just double tap. This is Snohomish County Airport. I want to go directly to my airport to my approach plates rather. So there's an icon in the on the right-hand side. It looks like an approach plate. I'm going to go right to it, and not that plate, not that plate, this one. All right. So we're flying along in this plate, and let's say that, although in fairness we just took off from this airport, but say that we wanted to land at the airport. First thing I notice is down the bottom there's an area which is not to scale. I want to make really certain that I don't forget that. So when I tap on the map, on the toolbar that appears on the left, there's a new icon. The bottom one looks like a scribble thing. When I click on the pen or the scribble icon, the toolbar that was there gets replaced by one with drawing tools. So by default we have a red pencil. The tools from the top to the bottom are opacity control, line width control, the drawing with a pen or not. You can control the color of the pen, by the way, with a toolbar on the right-hand side. If you don't want to use the pen, you can use the eraser below it. You can trash or delete the entire overlay that you write, and then you can turn scribble mode, as we call it, on and off by hitting the button again. So if I tap it now, it goes back to the regular mode. It lets you center on the plate, show the gauges, send this to the printer, whatever you want to do. But I will tap it, and let's get into annotating the plate. So I said that I want to be sure that when I looked at the VOR down the bottom, the Seattle VOR, that I was positive to not fly there thinking that was to scale. So I'm going to pick my red pen, and I'm simply going to draw an X on top of that. So one thing you may have noticed is that this line is completely opaque. Now I can use two fingers and zoom in and zoom out, because let's say that I wanted something a little different, that I wanted, and I'm actually going to take those same two fingers and move the map. I'll explain why in a second. I'm going to zoom in a little, go around here, and let's say they want to highlight the AHRS or the approach frequencies. So instead of using red, I'm going to change my pen to yellow to make it look like a regular highlighter. But I don't want it to completely obliterate what's on there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my opacity control, and I'm going to slide this. There's a little white line there. It's a little hard to see with yellow. But I'm going to slide that to somewhere towards the middle. Now, when I highlight AHRS or approach control, you can still see the number through it. It just gets highlighted. Okay? Just like that. So very simple, very easy to do. If you decide you don't like that, you can go from the pen to the eraser and you can erase that. Okay? So you can change the color, you can change the line width too. So for example, let's say that I wanted to draw a line, I'm going to make this one green. I want to make sure that I notice that it's 3,000 feet to Raro. So I'm going to outline that with a box like that. If that line thickness isn't what I wanted though, I can change the thickness control, make it much wider, should look kind of like this, or if I can make it much thinner and look like this. Notice that it's extremely fast too. So for example, if I wanted to write that AHRS frequency really big, making sure I could see it, maybe switch to the blue mode. I'm just going to write it. So 128.6, big circle around it. Okay. By the way, I'm not using an iPad Pro here. I'm just using what Apple now calls the iPad. It's their new $329 iPad. There's nothing fancy about it. Bottom of the line, the cheapest iPad that Apple actually sells. All right, so with the plate annotation, again, you can use 2 fingers to move it in and out. Also, little minor usability thing here. If you want to move this when you zoom in, so you want to move the plate to the left or move it to the right, it doesn't work quite the way you would expect it to, because if you take your finger and you move it to the left or the right, you draw a line. Okay, but you can still move it left and right by using 2 fingers, which I'm going to do right now. And now you can move it. So 2 fingers will either zoom in and zoom out, or you can use it, the same 2 fingers, to pan the map. Okay, so just remember that. 2 fingers is required to pan the map when you're in scribble mode. Now let's put that actually on the map. The button that's on the right-hand side of the screen for the map also works. So now we see our annotated plate on here. And of course I can go into split screen mode like this. So now in split screen mode, I'm going to move to the procedures view, flip through that, switch to a different plate, maybe zoom this in. So change this one as well. I'll write on it, hit the red, and make sure they realize that's where I'm going. Now notice that that hasn't been put on the map yet, hasn't been what you may call committed. When I turn off scribble mode by hitting the scribble button again, you see it updated on the map on the left-hand side. Okay. So again, if you flip the approach plates, the standard way in the product, you see complete with the scribble. If you decide that you're done with this, you don't want the scribble anymore, you go into annotation mode and you hit the button that looks like a trash can and confirm this, and it will delete it. Okay. Okay, so here's another use for the drawing on the approach plates or airport diagrams feature. In this case, I'm going to actually do the airport diagrams. So I'm flying along and I decide for whatever reason that I want to go to Tacoma Narrows instead and maybe land there. So Tacoma Narrows is on the left side of the screen. I'll double tap over here, pull up, just tap anywhere on the cell there for Tacoma Narrows. Notice I have 2 different sets of diagrams. On the left-hand side, or rather in the middle, I have the Seattle Avionics diagrams. We have 5,000 of those covering 5,000 different airports, and we draw those, versus the FAA, which only has 700 diagrams that's on the right-hand side. So let's pull up the diagram that the FAA has and put on my taxi instructions. I'm just going to tap on that. Let's turn the winds off. And hit the same icon which is available in the product when you're in the approach plates. It's in the upper left corner though now. It isn't on the tab bar, so it's this scribble icon here. I'll select red, that's perfectly fine. Zoom in a little. I'll land on runway 35, taxi to Alpha 3, maybe go to Alpha 2, Beta 3, then go up here, zoom this a little bit, and continue on to the hangars. Okay, so that's my taxi instructions. It's a relatively simple, relatively easy way of doing that with the product, and now you won't get lost when you're using the geo-referenced airport diagrams. Now, that works terrific for these, but let's say that I select the Seattle Avionics diagrams. So the Seattle Avionics diagrams, if you look at the bottom of the screen, have a number of bits of information that aren't on the FAA ones. In particular, we have where the restaurants, the FBOs, sometimes the fuel stops are, and so on. Of course, this information changes over time, so we ask the people report any problem that they find to us so that we can correct that. There's a button at the top of it that says report a problem. And notice what it says. This is the report a problem feature has been in the product for a while, but now that Scribble is here, it actually will ask you to scribble on the diagram, annotate the diagram to show us what's wrong. So I'll say, yeah, let's go back to this and I'll zoom in the map here. And let's say that one of the taxiways is out of service. So I'll pick red and say this one's out of service. Oh, and by the way, this FBO isn't here anymore, and this one is now called Bob over here. All right. So by being able to annotate on here, it's extremely convenient. So I turn annotation mode off, tell it to report a problem, and notice what you see. Now the plate, complete with the annotation, is in the email message, which makes it much easier for our chart data folks to go in and correct this. So that's a couple uses for using the diagrams. You can annotate the approach plates, you can annotate the airport diagrams from the FAA, and you can annotate the airport diagrams from Seattle Avionics. The Scratchpad feature got a similar upgrade, so let's go to my Scratchpad. Hit the button, and again I can choose which color I'm writing with. The default here is actually white, so again I could write in something like the AHRS frequencies. If I wanted to, I could say that the winds are 120 at 6, the visibility clear, and so on. Okay, all of this you can do rather easily. If you had something really awful that you want to write, or maybe you just want to say this is Zulu, and so on. I'm writing this, by the way, with my finger. It's very, very fast. Remember that FlyQ EFB Scratchpad is a multi-page Scratchpad. So in the upper corner, there's a number 1. It has a left and an arrow button, a left and right button. So here's page 2. So that's page number 2. Over here, on this one, I'm going to say that, like, oh, eat at Joe's, whatever the name of your favorite restaurant is. Very simple to do. If you want to clear that, just like in FlyQ EFB when I was showing you the scribbling on approach plates, you can hit the clear button. It asks you if you want to clear it. You can say yes. All right, still page 2. Okay, so that's the ability to use a Scratchpad. Again, it's multi-page, so I can go back to page 1, and there you are. Very convenient, especially when you're in split screen mode, because that way you can have something on the screen on the Scratchpad and, I don't know, maybe a map at the same time. Okay, terrific way to keep track of notes when you're landing or when you're looking at airport information. The Avidyne support has been in the product for a little while now, but we've dramatically enhanced it here. One of the great things about the Avidyne support is that you don't have to buy anything else. The Wi-Fi module has already been built into the Avidyne, and with its software version 10.2, it's fully exposing that data to devices and applications like FlyQ EFB. So again, you need version 10.2, and nothing additional is required. What we get from the IFD are a number of things. As with previous releases, we get the GPS feed, we get the AHRS feed for a true yaw pitch and roll. We can transfer flight plans to the device from FlyQ or from FlyQ to the device. What's new in this one is something that people really love, and that's the ability to take a look at ADS-B weather and ADS-B traffic, whether it's from a 978 source or a 1090 source. Obviously, to get that, you need to have the ADS-B module in your Avidyne system, but now that data is fully exposed to FlyQ EFB. In addition to the major features I just talked about, there's also been a number of small but very important features and fixes we've been working on for this release. Let me just talk about a few of them. The most common crash in the product, believe it or not, was actually when someone tried to reverse a flight plan when they weren't connected to the internet. So that's been fixed. We fixed a surprising performance problem when using the iPad Pro and the Apple Pencil. In fact, by fixing that, that's actually what gave us a motivation to do the work on the plate annotation and some other work to do with the Scratchpad. So it was a performance issue that actually led to a feature. There were a number of crashes that were very specific to the iPad 4. We corrected those, generally to do with ADS-B support. Also relating to ADS-B, with some Stratix builds, which is also the same as our Merlin device. The device, if it had an AHRS in it, would have a pressure sensor. And instead of displaying the altitude as based on a GPS, when we got the data from the Stratix, we were also seeing the pressure altitude, and we were displaying that. Now we display GPS altitude, as you would expect from a GPS in all cases. We also corrected a version number problem when using the Stratix ADS-B system. We previously always said version 1.0, regardless of what the version was. Now we show the proper version number. When FlyQ EFB introduced traffic from ADS-B, we added a 15 nautical mile ring around your plane so that you could judge where the targets were. Later, FlyQ EFB introduced a concept of user-definable rings and extended course line that kind of made that feature unnecessary. So now you have the ability to turn off the traffic ring, especially if you're already using one of the other ring layers, because it just gets visually noisy and confusing. There were a few places in the product that when we downloaded ADS-B weather data, it wasn't always propagated, it wasn't always made available to other parts of the program where it should have been. Those bugs have been corrected. When creating a search and rescue pattern, there are a couple of places where you would want to enter sometimes a number less than 1 but greater than 0. We wouldn't accept that in the way that you would normally enter it. That's been corrected. When using an ICAO flight plan, sometimes you weren't able to change the initial fuel setting, so that's been corrected. When you turn the gauge bar on the map on and off, we would not remember that between different states. When you exited the product and came back, we won't remember how you set that. We did that now. There were a number of cases where the surface winds at airports on those airport diagrams wasn't being properly displayed. We fixed a problem where the pre-flight checklist that would warn you if you had a flight plan if you needed to download data would sometimes say that you did need to download data even when in fact you did not. That's been fixed. When using a button to add in a SID or a star to your flight plan, we sometimes would have a problem where the ETE and the ground speed in the navlog were being displayed incorrectly. That's been fixed. And again, a number of memory optimizations, speed optimizations, general performance fixes, and so on to give you overall a smoother experience when using FlyQ EFB. So that's what's new in FlyQ EFB 2.5. The big things here are the annotation features for the approach plates and airport diagrams, and the dramatically enhanced support for Avidyne, including Avidyne's ADS-B system. For Seattle Avionics, I'm Steve Pedrachik. Thank you and have a great day.